On a warm afternoon in Asheville, when the Blue Ridge rolled like a soft hymn, and the wind smelled faintly of rain that had not made up its mind, Caleb Morgan knelt on a tired patio with a rubber mallet and a carpenter's pencil behind his ear. He was a landscape carpenter who believed patience is a tool, kindness is a fastener, and honest sweat is a kind of prayer. The house belonged to Rowan Hayes, an ICU nurse who had moved back from Toronto after her mother's surgery, and who carried a steadiness learned in bright rooms full of beeping courage. Rowan had called him because the stone path puddled after storms and her mother's cane did not like surprises. Caleb arrived with string lines, stakes, gravel, and a plan he had drawn on graph paper at the kitchen counter, while a kettle clicked toward boiling. He dug a shallow trench around the patio's edge, teaching water where to go. He raked, he tamped. He measured the slope with a level whose bubble told the truth without raising its voice. Rowan watched from the back door at first, a mug cupped in both hands, the afternoon light braiding itself through her hair. She stepped outside with lemonade and sliced peaches and a napkin folded like a small kindness. "Thank you," he said, and meant it beyond the sugar. She said thank you for telling the ground to be kinder. They spoke in the easy stops and starts of strangers learning the shape of each other's days. Her night shift rhythms, his early morning ritual of coffee and sharpened chisels. Her favorite sunrise at the overlook on Town Mountain. His favorite hardware store, where the owner sells nails like hope. Caleb did not ask for a life story. He let the work be an invitation. He laid bedding sand as if tucking the earth in. He set stones like sentences that needed to be both strong and beautiful. Rowan leaned against the cedar post and watched with the kind of attention that is its own gift. A neighbor waved from the alley and called out that the whole street believed in this project. Another neighbor set down a plate of cornbread like a blessing. The maple above them offered a lace of shade, and the chimes near the downspout wrote commas into the air. When Caleb lifted a stone and found a startled beetle, he moved it gently to the rosemary bed and said, "Sorry, buddy, wrong meeting." Rowan smiled and said, "You must be good at emergencies that don't feel like emergencies." He said, "Sometimes wood panics. I try not to." She asked how he learned the trade. He told her about a grandfather who fixed porches and a community college class that smelled like oak dust and second chances. About a mentor named Dev who taught him to listen to wood and people before picking a tool. She asked if he ever wished he had chosen a different life. He said sometimes on Invoices Day, never when the mallet answers with certainty. She said Invoices Day is also my least favorite. We call it charting. We survive with snacks. By mid-afternoon the trench was behaving, and the grade respected cane and knee and hope. Rowan's mother Nora opened the screen door to say the patio looked like it had decided to stand up straight. She asked if he wanted more lemonade. He said yes. She said manners should never go thirsty. Everyone laughed like a room remembered by kindness. Caleb set another stone and checked alignment against the string line. The bubble settled as if grateful. He swept polymeric sand across the joints and misted it until the surface darkened and then glowed. When he reached for his towel to wipe grit from his hands, Rowan stepped closer. The kind of step a person takes when choosing to be visible. He said, "I will wrap for the day and return at 8. The sentence felt too small for the quiet electricity between work and watching. Rowan looked at the new plane of stone, and then at him, and the wind held its breath for a heartbeat. She said, "Would you sit with me while the sand sets? I am practiced at being strong by myself, and I would like to practice being strong with someone who knows what patience sounds like." Caleb set the towel back on the sawhorse as if it were a page he did not want to lose. He said yes. They sat on the steps with their shoulders almost, not quite friendly. She told him about a year of night shifts and narrow escapes. About the morning she phoned from Toronto to Asheville to hear Nora's voice, and the relief was a weather system. About learning to carry two things at once, grief and duty, and not spill either. He told her about the winter his father's truck would not start, and how a neighbor taught him that batteries and people both fail when ignored. He told her about leaving a loud company to start a small one with quiet integrity. They let silence sit politely between them without forcing it to entertain. Rowan said, "You work like you are writing a letter to the future." He said, "You watch like you are proof the letter will be read." She laughed softly, and the maple seemed to approve. The sky shifted to a tender gold. A bird tested a melody. A distant dog rehearsed his argument with the male. Rowan asked if he would show her how to set one stone. "Not because I doubt you, because I need to feel the ground agree with me." He handed her the trowel and the mallet. He showed her the difference between a hollow thud that asks for more sand and the low note that says home. She set a stone and breathed in a way that loosened something in the air. He said, "There it is," and meant more than geology. They checked the joints one last time. Then she asked him to stay for soup. Lentils and carrots and the kind of seasoning you inherit from people who teach you that salt is wisdom. He stayed. They ate at the small table by the window while the radio argued gently with itself between folk and news. They rinsed bowls shoulder to shoulder like friends already learning choreography. By the door he reached for his towel, and she stood still like a sentence considering a better ending. She said another thing he did not expect. She said, "I like who I am when you are here. I am less brave alone and more brave with a witness. Would you come back tomorrow even if the patio does not require you? I want a day that is chosen." "Yes," he said, and the word sounded like a level finding center. In the morning he brought biscuits from Charlotte Street and a jar of blackberry jam that held sunrise in glass. Rowan wore a soft sweatshirt printed with a small heart and a tiny lightning bolt because she believed tenderness and courage belong in the same room. They fixed the loose railing together. He showed her how to sister a joist so a tired board could borrow strength. She showed him how to pull a splinter without scalding the finger. He taught her to countersink a screw so it would not catch a cuff. She taught him to keep a first aid kit within polite reach. They stood back, and the handrail made a quiet promise to the next winter. Neighbors arrived in a parade of kindness disguised as curiosity. Ruth from next door delivered hand pies and an opinion that the new line of stone looked like a place where truth might sit down. Ernie from the corner lent a ladder and a story about a storm that changed his mind about porches forever. Tamsin from across the alley asked if she could water the rosemary, because rosemary smells like remembering birthdays. Rowan said yes and thank you and took a photo of the ladder, because borrowed things deserve proof they were wanted. After lunch, they drove to the overlook and let the city teach their lungs generosity. The ridges repeated like a blessing. The hawk wrote loops in the sky. Rowan told him about winters in Toronto, where the sun is a disciplined athlete who still shows up. Caleb told her about summers in western North Carolina, where creek water takes you back to being 10 and sensible. At the community garden they thinned carrots and traded gossip with bees. Rowan introduced him as her friend. The word dug its small roots into the day. Evening returned with a polite breeze. They stood on the patio and watched the sand finish its true work. Rowan reached for his hand, the way a person reaches for light when the dimmer understands. She said the sentence that would change more than the patio. She said, "I would like to keep building this with you. Not just the stone part, the life part, the part where staying is a choice we keep making. Would you be open to moving mugs next to mugs and calendars into conversation and Sunday into soup?" Caleb nodded, and then said yes, because yes deserves to be heard. From there the weeks arranged themselves into a rhythm that felt like a good song. They finished the curve near the steps and built a bench under the maple with a lid for blankets and winter gossip. They hung small path lights so late returns would feel welcomed by a gentle constellation. They made a chalkboard in the kitchen where they wrote meals and moods, and added the word rest like it owed back rent. They met each other's people. June, who runs a taco truck with sauces that taste like apologies forgiven. Nikki, who teaches second graders to love books and each other. Dev, who showed Caleb how to hear Wood's opinion before forcing a cut. Nora, who told stories about Rowan at 5, so that Caleb could see the stubborn friend at 32. They learned the ordinary brilliance that romance channels often forget to praise. The art of making tea before apologies. The science of eating before arguing. The theology of naps. The diplomacy of earplugs. The civic duty of returning borrowed tools with cookies. The quiet sport of reading in the same room, and winning by finishing a paragraph at the same time. They hosted a small potluck on the new patio, and the stones discovered they were built for laughter, and chairs, and a child tracing a racetrack with chalk. Ruth read a poem about cedars and second tries. Ernie sang 2 verses of a country song until the maple intervened with wind. People left plates and promises, and someone left a sweater that fit Caleb so perfectly, it felt like consent from the neighborhood. On Tuesday nights, Rowan practiced piano and Caleb sanded the bench top again, because perfection is a rumor you chase kindly. She played a melody that remembered rivers, and he heard his day washing clean. He learned to say I am proud of you without turning it into a banner. She learned to say thank you without apologizing for needing help. In November, frost penned its first initials on the lawn, and Rowan came home from a long string of nights, heavy with a loss that refused caveats. She sat at the table and did not speak. Caleb made eggs and toast and a line of jam like sunrise and placed the plate down as if setting a beam. He did not ask for words. He listened to the ones that had not arrived yet. They walked the creek and threw leaves, and promised to keep promising. Winter put a white shawl on the patio and the maple listened inward. They strung lights along the path, and taped a note under the switch that said turn on gentleness. They drove to Pennsylvania to see Caleb's mother, and ate pierogies that taught the mouth about gratitude. They flew to Toronto in February to visit Rowan's old friend, Priya, and stood on a sidewalk where the cold argued and they laughed anyway. Spring arrived with mud and tulips behaving bravely. Rowan moved to a unit with better hours and sorrow that wore slippers. Caleb took on a footbridge redesign that asked him to translate safety into welcome. They kept a jar by the door labeled proof of kindness and filled it with ticket stubs and a thank you doodle from Tamsin, and a receipt that accidentally said, "You are loved because the printer missed letters." On the anniversary of the Lemonade Day, they invited the block to the patio. They placed a small plaque by the steps that read, "We decided to stay." People cried the way good rain falls, and someone started a version of a waltz that tripped over shoes and kept going. Later they stood under the maple where path lights turned faces into warm promises. And Rowan said, "I love you," like a person who has practiced honesty during emergencies. Caleb said, "I love you," like a person who has measured twice and decided once. They held each other and let the neighborhood be their choir. Years unfolded with ordinary miracles. The patio held birthdays and bandage changes and book clubs and quiet. The maple offered shade and lectures on letting go when it was time. The bench hid blankets and secrets, and one perfectly lucky feather. The chalkboard taught them that plans are polite, but welcome improvisation. The jar by the door got heavy with evidence. The thermometer on the rails survived a child's experiment and told the truth anyway. They argued sometimes in careful voices and learned to say, "I need a walk." They learned to replace a gutter elbow at dusk without blaming the roof for the storm. They learned that love is not a feeling that rescues, but a practice that stays. They learned to be silly in grocery aisles and gracious in traffic. They learned to keep soup in the freezer and spare towels in the car, and hope in the pocket. One summer evening when Caleb reached for his towel, after setting a stepping stone near the herb bed, Rowan said the sentence again in a new key. "Please stay a few minutes," and he did. Sitting until stars stitched themselves to the sky. Learning again that staying is the art that makes all other arts possible. Through it all, the neighborhood became a family on purpose. Mail carriers got to know their names. Kids asked for hammer lessons and left drawings of birds. Ruth's hand pies triggered debates about nutmeg and the correct number of thank yous. Ernie kept lending tools that returned with better stories. Nora told anyone who would listen that the railing saved her winter one step at a time. Priya sent photos of frozen Toronto streets and promised to visit when thaw found its manners. The creek swelled and shrank. The hawk kept its circles. The rosemary tried to be a bush and also a memory. The radio at the sink switched from folk to the news and back. They turned it down when grief forgot to whisper, and turned it up when hope had a solo. They kept the chalkboard current. They added new names and recipes. They erased the word perfect and wrote the word present. And on the quiet mornings when the city had not yet discovered its voice, Caleb walked to the patio with coffee and looked at the stones he had set and the life they were holding. And he said a thank you he did not need to explain. The pile of library books beside the couch asked them softly that ordinary work is devotion breathing steadily. The rosemary bread cooling on the rack outlived their worry, that forgiveness swings like a door once the hinge is oiled. The creek rehearsing its lullaby listened without hurry, that ordinary work is devotion breathing steadily. The mallet with its soft authority welcomed their return, that home grows where hands are useful and words are kind. The path lights that made late returns gentle invited them again, that neighborhoods become family by choice and invitation. The shoes lined up by size at the step gently insisted that ordinary work is devotion breathing steadily. The creek rehearsing its lullaby brightened their courage that mornings are promises kept at night. The rosemary bread cooling on the rack proved their patience that names matter most when spoken carefully. The ladder borrowed from Ernie carried their plans that laughter braces the day like a hidden beam. The thermos that held courage warm welcomed their return, that names matter most when spoken carefully. The gentle creak of the back door at dawn listened without hurry, that soup is architecture for tired hours. The snow melting into clean edges welcomed their return, that forgiveness swings like a door once the hinge is oiled. The radio that preferred folk at dusk listened without hurry, that planning is a letter the future can read. The gravel base holding the shape brightened their courage, that tenderness survives on practice and practical chores. The string line that never lied promised them in small ways that forgiveness swings like a door once the hinge is oiled. The first aid kit within reach brightened their courage that rest is a duty not a luxury. The tiny chip in the favorite mug invited them again, that ordinary work is devotion breathing steadily. The level with its quiet bubbles steadied them without applause that silence is trustworthy when it listens first. The mailbox that knew their names asked them softly that being seen helps the day stand taller. The mallet with its soft authority kept telling them that names matter most when spoken carefully. The chalk that turned stone into stories welcomed their return, that neighborhoods become family by choice and invitation. The casserole dish Ruth forgot and never asked back for outlived their worry that silence is trustworthy when it listens first. The spare key beneath the third stone made clear to them that apology sands along the grain, not against it. The maple above their bench reminded them that rest is a duty, not a luxury. The gravel base holding the shape proved their patience that silence is trustworthy when it listens first. The bench lid whispering shut nudged them forward, that forgiveness swings like a door once the hinge is oiled. The maple above their bench quietly taught them that love is a craft practiced daily with small tools and honest rest. The shoes lined up by size at the step promised them in small ways that courage looks like asking for help before the ladder is too high. The maple above their bench listened without hurry, that love is a craft practiced daily with small tools and honest rest. The path lights that made late returns gentle listened without hurry, that home grows where hands are useful and words are kind. The string line that never lied kept telling them that neighborhoods become family by choice and invitation. The kitchen window catching slant light gently insisted that grief can sit beside joy without stealing its chair. The steady handrail Nora trusted made clear to them that apology stands along the grain, not against it. The neighbor's porch swing sounding like laughter reminded them that silence is trustworthy when it listens first. The ladder borrowed from Ernie invited them again that laughter braces the day like a hidden beam. The path lights that made late returns gentle guarded their hours. That planning is a letter the future can read. The ladder borrowed from Ernie made clear to them that being seen helps the day stand taller. The coffee mugs finding their shelf showed them plainly that planning is a letter the future can read. The maple above their bench outlived their worry that courage looks like asking for help before the ladder is too high. The gentle creak of the back door at dawn steadied them without applause that mornings are promises kept at night. Grr. Thermos that held courage warm welcomed their return. That love is a craft practiced daily with small tools and honest rest. The spare key beneath the third stone welcomed their return. That forgiveness swings like a door once the hinge is oiled. The gentle creak of the back door at dawn kept telling them that forgiveness swings like a door once the hinge is oiled. The gravel base holding the shape invited them again that names matter most when spoken carefully. The chalkboard with smudged plans guarded their hours that names matter most when spoken carefully. The neighbor's porch swing sounding like laughter reminded them that mornings are promises kept at night. The measuring tape with a dent at 7 nudged them forward that silence is trustworthy when it listens first. The toolbox smelling of cedar held them together that patience keeps a music of its own. The candle in the storm guarded their hours, that tenderness survives on practice and practical chores. The creek rehearsing its lullaby showed them plainly that soup is architecture for tired hours. The candle in the storm quietly taught them that neighborhoods become family by choice and invitation. The thermos that held courage warm blessed their routine, that planning is a letter the future can read. The towel folded on the sawhorse kept telling them that tenderness survives on practice and practical chores. The shoes lined up by size at the step showed them plainly that laughter braces the day like a hidden beam. The work gloves drying on the radiator quietly taught them that neighborhoods become family by choice and invitation. The chalkboard with smudged plans proved their patience that neighborhoods become family by choice and invitation. The welcome mat gathering pine needles quietly taught them that courage looks like asking for help before the ladder is too high. The welcome mat gathering pine needles gently insisted that mornings are promises kept at night. The thermos that held courage warm invited them again. That soup is architecture for tired hours. The rosemary bread cooling on the rack kept telling them that soup is architecture for tired hours. The hawk drawing a patient circle steadied them without applause. That mornings are promises kept at night. The kitchen window catching slant light reminded them that silence is trustworthy when it listens first. The kitchen window catching slant light made clear to them that planning is a letter the future can read. The bench lid whispering shut gently insisted that apology sands along the grain, not against it. The photograph of Priya on the fridge proved their patience that mornings are promises kept at night. The spare key beneath the third stone guarded their hours that neighborhoods become family by choice and invitation. The welcome mat gathering pine needles made clear to them that courage looks like asking for help before the ladder is too high. The toolbox smelling of cedar blessed their routine that staying is a decision you renew. The jar by the door heavy with kindness steadied them without applause that grief can sit beside joy without stealing its chair. The hawk drawing a patient circle gently insisted that soup is architecture for tired hours. The level with its quiet bubble quietly taught them that apology sands along the grain, not against it. The kitchen window catching slant light showed them plainly that grief can sit beside joy without stealing its chair. The casserole dish Ruth forgot and never asked back for invited them again. That mornings are promises kept at night. The gravel base holding the shape held them together. That courage looks like asking for help before the ladder is too high. The shoes lined up by size at the step held them together. That forgiveness swings like a door once the hinge is oiled. The rosemary learning to be a small forest outlived their worry, that being seen helps the day stand taller. The pantry scent of cinnamon nudged them forward, that tenderness survives on practice and practical chores. The work gloves drying on the radiator listened without hurry, that home grows where hands are useful and words are kind. The towel folded on the sawhorse gently insisted that mornings are promises kept at night. The broom brushing sand into seams welcomed their return, that soup is architecture for tired hours. The broom brushing sand into seams guarded their hours, that neighborhoods become family by choice and invitation. The measuring tape with a dent at 7 proved their patience, that tenderness survives on practice and practical chores. The tiny chip in the favorite mug quietly taught them that soup is architecture for tired hours. The coffee mugs finding their shelf carried their plans, that ordinary work is devotion breathing steadily. The spare key beneath the third stone listened without hurry, that forgiveness swings like a door once the hinge is oiled. The rain chain turning weather musical proved their patience, that soup is architecture for tired hours. The photograph of Priya on the fridge listened without hurry, that planning is a letter the future can read. The thermos that held courage warm made clear to them that planning is a letter the future can read. The coffee mugs finding their shelf made clear to them that time softens edges if given room. The shoes lined up by size at the step promised them in small ways that love is a craft, practiced daily with small tools and honest rest. The hawk drawing a patient circle welcomed their return, that silence is trustworthy when it listens first. The maple above their bench steadied them without applause, that staying is a decision you renew. The rosemary bread cooling on the rack showed them plainly that rest is a duty, not a luxury. The rosemary bread cooling on the rack blessed their routine, that forgiveness swings like a door once the hinge is oiled. The jar by the door, heavy with kindness, gently insisted that grief can sit beside joy without stealing its chair. The path lights that made late returns gentle invited them again, that patience keeps a music of its own. The welcome mat gathering pine needles kept telling them that laughter braces the day like a hidden beam. The measuring tape with a dent at 7 showed them plainly that silence is trustworthy when it listens first. The snow melting into clean edges carried their plans, that laughter braces the day like a hidden beam. The rosemary learning to be a small forest held them together, that silence is trustworthy when it listens first. The steady handrail Nora trusted quietly taught them that tenderness survives on practice and practical chores. The maple above their bench asked them softly that tenderness survives on practice and practical chores. The mallet with its soft authority welcomed their return, that soup is architecture for tired hours. The chalk that turned stone into stories outlived their worry, that patience keeps a music of its own. The spare key beneath the third stone made clear to them that courage looks like asking for help before the ladder is too high. The photograph of Priya on the fridge steadied them without applause, that home grows where hands are useful and words are kind. The shoes lined up by size at the step blessed their routine, that grief can sit beside joy without stealing its chair. The mailbox that knew their names steadied them without applause, that grief can sit beside joy without stealing its chair. The maple above their bench blessed their routine, that apology sands along the grain, not against it. The pile of library books beside the couch proved their patience, that being seen helps the day stand taller. The level with its quiet bubble carried their plans, that soup is architecture for tired hours. The mailbox that knew their names held them together, that planning is a letter the future can read. The broom brushing sand into seams showed them plainly that soup is architecture for tired hours. The radio that preferred folk at dusk outlived their worry, that planning is a letter the future can read. The broom brushing sand into seams reminded them that rest is a duty, not a luxury. The work gloves drying on the radiator held them together, that apology sands along the grain, not against it. The oven timer that saved cornbread invited them again, that apology sands along the grain, not against it. The first aid kit within reach reminded them that planning is a letter the future can read. The towel folded on the sawhorse brightened their courage, that patience keeps a music of its own. The rosemary bread cooling on the rack kept telling them that courage looks like asking for help before the ladder is too high. The pantry scent of cinnamon gently insisted that courage looks like asking for help before the ladder is too high. The ladder borrowed from Ernie blessed their routine that tenderness survives on practice and practical chores. The rosemary bread cooling on the rack promised them in small ways that home grows where hands are useful and words are kind. The welcome mat gathering pine needles welcomed their return that tenderness survives on practice and practical chores. The snow melting into clean edges proved their patience that tenderness survives on practice and practical chores. The path lights that made late returns gentle welcome their return, that grief can sit beside joy without stealing its chair. The thermos that held courage warm showed them plainly that silence is trustworthy when it listens first. The level with its quiet bubble reminded them that ordinary work is devotion breathing steadily. The towel folded on the sawhorse gently insisted that patience keeps a music of its own. The maple above their bench quietly taught them that patience keeps a music of its own. The broom brushing sand into seams proved their patience that apology sands along the grain not against it. The rain chain turning weather musical nudged them forward, that planning is a letter the future can read. The jar by the door heavy with kindness proved their patience that courage looks like asking for help before the ladder is too high. The photograph of Priya on the fridge promised them in small ways that planning is a letter the future can read. The steady handrail Nora trusted asked them softly that mornings are promises kept at night. The first aid kit within reach showed them plainly that soup is architecture for tired hours. The mailbox that knew their names asked them softly that ordinary work is devotion breathing steadily. The coffee mugs finding their shelf brightened their courage that planning is a letter the future can read. The ladder borrowed from Ernie nudged them forward that rest is a duty not a luxury.